Tyler, this is Dennis. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Member Nylander, we've got you, and I think we're just about ready to start. So, Chair.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, this is Chair Douglas. We'll call this meeting to order, and the first order of business is our roll call to make sure we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. Member Jerry Merritt.
Good morning, I'm here.
Great. Member Dennis Nylander.
Good morning, I'm here as well.
Member Rihanna Durrett.
Here.
Member Young.
Good morning, I am present.
Great. And Chairman Douglas.
I'm here, and good morning to the board members.
Great. Deputy Bollock, can you please confirm that we have complied with the open meeting law requirements?
We have, sir.
Great. With the chair's approval, I'll get started with introducing agenda item number 1.
Please go forward.
Great. Let's get started. Agenda item number 1 is public comment. Ms. Bonner will now read into the record all public comment received up until the start time of this meeting. Any public comment received after the start of the meeting will be read into the record at the second public comment period. Ms. Bonner will end each individual reading at the 3-minute mark, and all public comment will be posted online for the public to view immediately following the meeting. So with that, Ms. Bonner, if we've received public comment, could you please read it into the record?
Yes, Director Cannabis, we've received one public comment so far. I will start reading it now. This is from Tim Clark. By way of introduction, I'm Tim Clark, President and CEO of Radio Frequency Company, Millis, Massachusetts. I have 31 years of experience with RFC, primarily in the design, manufacture, and global distribution of radio frequency pasteurization systems for the food industry, namely cereal, grains, protein powders, tree nuts, and a wide variety of ready-to-eat finished goods. Over the last approximate 5 years, this experience has been expanded into the medical and adult use cannabis products, as well as hemp-based consumables. Over the course of those 31 years, I've dealt extensively with the FDA, USDA, and like governing bodies around the world, and have a very good understanding of the electromagnetic energy spectrum, and of course, the difference between low energy non-ionizing radiation and high energy ionizing radiation. He also includes a graph. So everything across the spectrum is a form of electromagnetic radiation. At the low end, there's low energy radio frequency energy, a form of non-ionizing radiation. And at the high end, there's an energy X-rays and gamma rays, a form of ionizing radiation, also referred to as irradiation. As both forms of energy have been extensively utilized in the food industry for many years, they have both been studied extensively by the FDA, the USDA, the FCC, OSHA, and like bodies around the world. All regulatory bodies are in unanimous agreement that the Radura label is reserved for high energy ionizing forms of radiation, irradiation only, as it can and does cause changes to food materials on a molecular level, whereas low energy RF cannot. There's a huge volumes of published scientific data to this end that can be easily Googled. It's also readily available from the FDA and USDA as well. For that matter, one can also look at the label itself, where it clearly designates its use for materials that have been irradiated. In closing, I will simply say that I strongly object to the decision to require cannabis products pasteurized by radio frequency energy to affix the Radura label. The label itself means that the product has been irradiated or treated with ionizing radiation when it has not. Obviously, this is misleading to the public and also causes damage to the RF industry as a whole, as we pride ourselves and promote our technology as both organic and natural. The USDA does not view the RF thermal process as an added ingredient. Therefore, an organic product treated with RF can carry the certified organic label. Additionally, the FDA does not view the RF thermal process as invalidating the application of natural on the label, unlike irradiation, which is considered an additive, and therefore requires approval and the Radura label. Please reference the following link, wherein the FDA clearly defines the ionizing irradiation processes, which require the Radura label, RF not being one of them. As a practical side note, by including RF on the low energy end of the electromagnetic spectrum, with X-rays and gamma rays on the high end of the spectrum, wouldn't that then mean that everything in between should carry the Radura label as well? Director Cannabis, we also received one more public comment before the start of the meeting that I will read now as well. This is from Danny Baranowski with the Chamber of Cannabis. Just one moment. On behalf of our organization, the Chamber of Cannabis would like to acknowledge the impactful legislation working its way through the legislative process to reform antiquated cannabis laws and move the cannabis industry forward with more transparency and inclusivity. We're grateful for the opportunity to voice our concerns and solutions to the board and for the guidance and support provided thus far. We recognize the additional work ahead for the CCB as so many potential regulations will need to be promulgated. We look forward to what is to come and are happy to be a resource for the board and a voice for the passionate leaders shaping the industry and community. Thank you for your time and attention to pertinent issues facing Nevada's cannabis industry. And with that, Director Klimas, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. So we'll move on to agenda item number 2. This is the consideration for approval of the February 23rd CCB board meeting minutes. Chair?
The minutes from February 23rd, 2021 have been distributed to the board members. If they have any corrections or additions, please so note. If not, if I can have a motion for approval.
This is Member Jerry Merritt. I motion to approve the minutes.
And do we have a second?
This is Member Nylander. I would second that motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any additions or corrections, as I previously noted? Hearing none. All in favor of adoption of the minutes? Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Great. Chair, we will move on to agenda item number 3. This is the continuation of the briefing to the board concerning the January 19th workshop. I'll now turn it over to Member Young to just give a brief update on recommendations and where we're at. Member Young?
Good morning, board, and I apologize for being only on the telephone this morning. So since our last meeting, we've had 2 additional meetings with the industry and have received numerous comments from the public and from industry. I have an ongoing conversation with Zeal Industries regarding a study that they presented to us at their meeting. So at this point, I would like to again postpone making any further recommendations as we receive more information until our next meeting, where I'd like to address this issue again if the board is in agreement with this. I'll turn it back to Director.
From the chair standpoint, that would be fine. Hopefully, and I know that you're up in Northern Nevada, there was an article in the Reno Gazette Journal talking about packaging and notice. I don't know if you had a chance to review that article out of the Reno Gazette Journal. But yes, this matter, we should take our time carefully, and so continuing this matter is appropriate.
Great. And Director, yes, I did get a chance to read that editorial. Yes, and that just shows you, how broad the input is from the public, and this is from a medical professional. Obviously, a lot of information that's come in.
And it's a balance between the information we're getting from the industry as well as the ultimate consumer's kind of right to know. So it's trying to balance those 2 interests. So if we'll continue that to our next meeting, which would be our April meeting.
Great. We'll do so. So we'll move on to agenda item 4. Chair, members of the board, item 4 is concerns 2 complaints for disciplinary action. Pursuant to NRS 678-510, the Attorney General has reviewed these violations and has recommended proceeding with disciplinary action. I'll now present the violations alleged and request the board vote to authorize the service of the complaint for disciplinary action. As to respondent A, the complaint will allege violations of the following regulations: multiple violations of NCCR Regulation 4, multiple violations of NCCR Regulation 6, and 1 violation of NCCR Regulation 11. As to respondent B, the complaint will allege violations of the following statutes and regulations: multiple violations of NRS Chapter 678B, 1 violation of NCCR Regulation 4, and 1 violation of NCCR Regulation 5. So with that, Chair, I will turn this back to you.
We presented with approval of service of complaints as to licensee A, and licensee B pursuant to NRS 678, based on the recommendation of the Attorney General. If we can have a motion for approval of the service of complaint only at this time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Member Nylander. I would move that we approve agenda item number 4, A1 and 2, as you reflected, as we are only approving the service of the complaint and not the merits of the complaint, which we know nothing about other than what Mr. Klimas has just told us. So,
Okay, with that, do we have a second?
This is Member Jerry Merritt. I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and second. Any additional discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Matter carries as to service of complaints only as licensee A and B.
Thank you, Chair. We will now move on to agenda item number 5. This is the request for transfers of interest. Dave Staley, Chief Investigator for the CCB, will now present this item. So, Mr. Staley, when you're ready, you could get started.
Good morning. Chair Douglas, Member Merritt, Member Nylander, Member Durrett, and Member Young. For the record, I am David Staley, Chief Investigator for the CCB. I'm here to present agenda item number 5, which consists of 2 transfer of interest or TOI applications. Item A are the TOI applications for DigiPath Inc. or DigiPath. DigiPath has requested that this item be pushed back and heard on the April agenda. So I'll move that back to you, Chair Douglas. Checking to see if that's acceptable to move DigiPath to the April agenda.
We will move that to the April agenda.
Thank you. Item B is a TOI application for a New Leaf Cultivation Center LLC or a New Leaf Cultivation and a New Leaf Production Center LLC or a New Leaf Production. TOI number 19029 requests approval for Alex Hose to purchase the ownerships in a New Leaf Cultivation and a New Leaf Production from Gary Hansen, Aaron Hansen, Margot Klein, Michael Peavy, Gay Leclerc-Lyon, and Mark Regiers. If this TOI is approved, Alex Hose will own 60% of a New Leaf Cultivation and 44% of a New Leaf Production. Staff has identified no areas of concern with this application. I am available for questions, and my understanding is that Alexander Hose, Ed Humphrey, Michael Morgan, and Catherine Lundgren are present today via Zoom to address any questions you may have as well. With that, Chair Douglas, I'll turn this item back to you.
Thank you. For the board members, before we entertain a decision, if the applicants wish to address us, since there were no areas of concern listed in the backup, they're free to address us as to their license, the TOI matters.
So, Amber, if you could unmute Mr. Morgan or Ms. Lundgren if they're on, and if those 2 individuals are on, please go ahead.
Yes, sorry about that. This is Ed Humphrey representing Alex Hose. Thank you, board members. We don't have any comments unless there's any questions from the board. I was struggling with getting Zoom to hook back up there, so I apologize for that delay.
Thank you for appearing, board members. If you have any concerns or follow-up questions based upon the report, it's your opportunity to so inquire.
Mr. Chairman, a quick question. It appears that this really is just a buyout of these minority interest members on both sides.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. Nylander. Mr. Hose was a minority member of these entities prior. to the transfer application, and he is buying out several other minority members.
Thank you.
With that, any other board member wish to ask any questions of the licensee or council? If that is no additional questions, we'll go forward with the a motion for approval of the TOI in this particular case. If we can have a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Member Durrett, for the record, I move to approve agenda item. I'm sorry, I don't see the number, but the transfer of interest in New Leaf Cultivation Center.
Okay. Do we have a second?
this is Member Nylander. I would second that motion.
Okay. And we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Any additional discussion or concerns as of this matter? Hearing none. The motion for approval of TOI 19029 is before us. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, so we'll move on to agenda item number 6. This is the consideration of proposed settlement agreements to resolve disciplinary action. Chris Rath, counsel for the CCB, will now present the 2 proposed settlement agreements for the board to consider individually. So Deputy Rath, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Good morning, Director Klimas. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. L. Christopher Rath, Senior Deputy Attorney General. We have 2 settlement agreements up for approval at this meeting under agenda item 6. As usual, for each one on the agenda, I'll provide you with a brief summary of the agreement, the Attorney General's recommendation for approval, and then you may ask me any questions that you wish. And we will also have either a representative of the respondent or an attorney for the respondent to make any comments or answer any questions that they wish. The first matter is Cannabis Compliance Board versus Nye Tech Farms Limited, CCB case number 2021-33. This case did not involve a complaint. Rather, as you recall, the matter came up at 2 CCB meetings, one in January and one in December. At that time, the CCB considered Nye FarmTech's transfer of interest application. It was determined that further documents were required for additional evaluation of the matter. Ultimately, the respondent provided those documents. CCB staff reviewed the additional documents and based on that review, identified some areas of concern with the application involving unapproved transfers of interest. Nye FarmTech, through its point of contact, Mr. Saga, subsequently entered into discussions on the issues with both CCB staff and the Attorney General's office, and we came to a mutually agreeable resolution of this matter contingent on CCB approval. As indicated in the settlement agreement before you, respondent has waived its rights to the filing and service of a disciplinary complaint and admitted and agreed to the imposition of 2 Category 2 violations for failing to notify the Department of Taxation and CCB of changes in ownership interest. Respondent also agreed to pay a $15,000 fine as a civil penalty. The transfer of interest would be deemed approved as of the date the CCB receives the penalty. Based on this, the Attorney General recommends and requests the CCB approve the settlement agreement. I'm available for any questions on this, as is Mr. Saga, the point of contact for the respondent.
Before we ask any questions of our attorney, if we can have the licensee, the representative, or Mr. Sager.
So Amber, if you could please unmute Mr. Saga. Mr. Saga, when you're unmuted.
Yes, we are on the unit here. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
You entered into a settlement agreement, and you've reviewed that document, and you're in agreement as to what's put forth in that, sir?
Yes, sir. We are.
And again, thank you for your cooperation in resolving this matter.
Thank you, sir.
Any of our board members have any additional questions as to this proposed settlement?
Mr. Chairman, this is Member Nylander. Just a quick two questions. First, it appears the civil penalty is broken into two parts, which reflects two different violations, one from two different licensees. So it's actually $7,500 per violation for each licensee. I just want to make sure I understand that correctly.
Member Nylander, that's a little different. It's two penalties for two licenses. One is adult use and one is medical. And just as an accounting matter, we split it between the two licenses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so $7,500 per licensee, one medical, one being rec.
Correct.
Okay. And then my second question, I know that the applicants have, we've discussed these matters at length in previous meetings, but I want to make sure the staff and the AG's office is comfortable that the applicant understands that going forward, that these types of violations, they understand that they are violations and they can't reoccur.
Yes, Mr. Nylander, both myself and Mr. Staley have discussed this at length with Mr. Saga, and I believe he does understand how to complete these transfers in the future.
Okay, just want to make sure the record was clear on that, just because we have discussed this at length in prior meetings, and so I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you, sir.
Any other board members have any questions or concerns they wish to raise?
I do. Rihanna Drett for the record. I remember, maybe this question is for Mr. Rath, making a comment at the hearing when this came up that I would like to see that the stipulation required that he familiarize himself with the regulations. Maybe it didn't fit nicely into the settlement agreement. So I guess it's not a question, Mr. Sagas. Part of this is echoing what Member Nylander said. It's your responsibility to be familiar with all of the regulations, and you have a lot of duties under those regulations. And if you're violating those regulations and you come before the board again, the violations will be taken much more seriously. So it is your responsibility. And I see that you have new counsel, and I'm glad you have counsel that's now that's familiar with this industry and with the regulations. I would stick with them and rely on them because you need to become familiar with all of your responsibilities under the regulations.
Yes, ma'am. We are, and I appreciate the chance. Thank you so much.
Okay. Again, any other questions or comments any board member wishes to make? Hearing no additional comments at this time. All in favor of the stipulation in order for settlement of the disciplinary action? If we can have a motion and a second, please.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
It's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Nylander. It's been seconded by Renee Durant. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none. The matter carries. The stipulation order for settlement of the disciplinary action is carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Rath?
Thank you, Chair. The next case that's coming up for settlement is the Cannabis Compliance Board versus My Life Organics, case number 2021-35. This case also did not involve a complaint. It's another transfer of interest matter. It concerns respondents' transfer of interest request that was heard at the last CCB meeting in February. Prior to that February CCB meeting, CCB staff with the Attorney General's office did confer with counsel for My Life Organics, as well as the licensee, and came up with an agreement in principle to resolve the issues with an unapproved transfer of interest, which would be contingent on CCB approval. CCB staff, through Mr. Staley, presented this proposed resolution to CCB at the February meeting, basically discussing the anticipated admission to a violation and the fine that we were considering. The CCB generally accepted the proposal, obviously contingent on the preparation of an appropriate settlement agreement that memorialized that. That particular settlement agreement is now before you. As indicated in the settlement agreement, respondent waived its rights to the filing and service of a disciplinary complaint and agreed and admitted to the imposition of one Category 2 violation for failing to notify CCB of a change in ownership interest. This respondent also agreed to pay a $15,000 fine as a civil penalty. Based on this, the Attorney General recommends and requests the CCB approve the settlement agreement. I'm available for any questions, as is respondent and their counsel.
Thank you, counsel. Before we go further, if we can have counsel on behalf of the licensee from the Kemper and Crow Law Firm and the licensee make any comments for the record.
Great, thanks. Amber, if you could please unmute Ms. Martinez and Mr. Bartoletta. And when you're unmuted, please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, board. Good morning, board. This is Brianna Martinez here on behalf of My Life Organics. Mr. Bartoletta is also on the line as a representative of My Life Organics. We agree with the statements made by Mr. Rath and to the terms and conditions of the settlement. And again, we ask the board to approve the settlement and want to thank staff for their work on the transfer and the settlement agreement. We are available for any questions, and thank you again.
Thank you. Members of the board, questions or as to counsel for the board or from the licensee?
Mr. Chairman, this is Member Nylander, and just as a matter of disclosure, the licensee's counsel in this case happened to be employed by the same law firm I am. I am not technically an employee of the law firm. I'm of counsel. I don't have a pecuniary interest in the firm, and I don't believe that my participation in this matter would affect any independence of judgment, and so I intend to go ahead and vote on this matter. I did have a quick question for Mr. Rath. It appears that, again, we split this $15,000 two ways, and I assume it's the same as the previous matter, and the fine is the exact same amount and based on very similar circumstances.
That is correct, Member Nylander. It was split between the medicinal and adult use licenses, same way as before.
And to follow up again on the last item, for you, Mr. Rath, and for staff, are you convinced that these applicants understand now that they can't do these transfers of ownership without prior approval?
Member Nylander, yes, I am. Again, both Mr. Staley and myself discussed these matters in detail with counsel for the respondent.
Great, thank you.
With that, any other questions in regard to this matter? Hearing no additional questions, if we can have a motion for acceptance of the stipulation order for settlement of discipline action as to My Life Organics.
Member Dret, for the record, I move to approve the settlement agreement in agenda item 6B relating to My Life Organics.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Member Merritt, for the record, I second.
We have a motion for approval and a second as to that motion. Any additional discussion? All in favor of accepting the stipulation order for settlement of the disciplinary action as to My Life Organics, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Great. So Chair, we'll move on to agenda item number 7. This is the approvals and resolutions. This is an informational item presented as a notice to the Board of Establishments that have been issued their final license since the last board meeting. We have 3 licenses to note today. The first concerns Live Free Wellness, RD 547. This is an adult use retail store located at 8605 Southeastern Avenue in Las Vegas. The pre-opening audit inspection was conducted on December 29th of 2020. The inspection showed the facility to be in compliance with the NCCR and Title 56. No deficiencies were noted, and final approval was granted on February 24th, 2021. Second license concerns Lone Mountain Partners. This is RD 592. This is an adult use retail facility located at 4444 Craig Road in North Las Vegas. The pre-opening audit inspection was conducted on February 2nd, 2021. The inspection showed the facility to be in compliance with the NCCR and Title 56. No deficiencies were noted, and final approval was granted on February 22nd, 2021. The third license today concerns Nevada Medical Group. This is an adult use distribution facility located in the city of Las Vegas. The pre-opening audit inspection was conducted on December 10th, 2020. The results showed the facility to be in compliance with the NCCR and Title 56. No deficiencies were noted, and final approval was granted on February 19th of 2021. So with that, Chair, members of the board, I'm happy to answer any questions on agenda item 7.
I have no additional questions as to that. Any other board members have any questions or concerns, or? Since
No
these are
question.
for just discussion?
Okay. So that brings us to agenda item number 8. This is the briefing to the board from the executive director. So, Chair and members, for the report this month, Chair, you actually had asked that we do a little research on cannabis micro licenses and micro businesses, which exist in other states, and to look at how Nevada may approach these as an opportunity to bring more individuals into the cannabis industry. I was able to have a number of conversations with our counterparts in Oregon, Massachusetts, and Michigan regarding each one of their programs, all a little bit different. Briefly, these are essentially smaller scale licenses that are issued and have certain restrictions, either on the amount of cannabis that can be cultivated, produced, or sold, or the license can be limited to establishments and entities that fall under a threshold of employees. So the goal here is to create smaller, more localized businesses. These are not the only 2 models. Every state is a little bit different, or every state that employs these is a little bit different. But the main purpose is to provide opportunity to individuals through a smaller scale operational license as compared to, normal establishments or licenses. In Michigan, for example, these micro businesses are vertically integrated, so consisting of cultivation, production, and retail. You can only sell what you grow and produce. There's also a cap, I believe it's 150 plants that you're able to cultivate. In New Jersey, they don't allow for vertical integration, and so these micro businesses are specific to an establishment type. New Jersey's plan allocates a certain percentage of licenses statewide to be awarded to micro businesses, and includes a streamlined application process. So really, there's an emphasis placed on awarding these micro businesses. I believe in New Jersey, they have to have less than 10 employees to qualify as a micro business. New Jersey's program is not currently up and running yet, but that is the proposed model. In short, I think the micro business or the micro license model is certainly something the CCB should continue to research and be prepared to consider. It would likely take a statutory change to create that kind of license. One thing I did take from a lot of these conversations that is it's important to look at the viability of these smaller licenses to succeed in an industry that hosts other larger players. If we are interested in bringing new individuals into the industry, especially if we're talking about social equity in this conversation, we want to create a system where the applicant has an opportunity to succeed. To think about, is a crop limit on a small cultivation facility or even a smaller vertically integrated facility where, one bad harvest can potentially have devastating effects on the business. Is that a viable model? And I'm not saying that it's not, but it's something that we should really look at and understand before we proceed down that path. If you look at where we're at and where I think most of the other markets are, obviously the adult use retail store is really the most lucrative license. And beyond being lucrative, it's also likely the easiest point of entry into the industry, technically speaking, when comparing to the other establishment types. So a question we should consider is, should we also be looking at ways to increase participation, in general and at the retail level if we're to really ensure more diverse participation and new entrants having the ability and opportunity to be successful. Either way, and what's true for the CCB in all aspects is that we need to continue to expand on our internal analysis of our market here in the state. That includes analysis on supply and demand, as well as the need for new licenses across the establishment spectrum. And with these instances of considering new license types like micro businesses, perform that kind of analysis that's going to show us if this is a viable business model for potential licensees. What are the true startup costs for something like this as compared to other license types? And trying to take the guesswork out and make good policy decisions based on data. I will say that the Cannabis Advisory Commission, with it coming online, this may be a great topic for the commission to continue looking at, to understand best practices and begin to analyze how these micro businesses or micro licenses are working in other states, and they'd be a good fit for Nevada. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that when I finish here. I don't think that should be our last conversation on this topic. I've directed staff to continue to research micro businesses, and we will certainly be prepared to discuss in detail if this becomes a direction that the board would like to explore further. Other than that, share briefly for our legislative update, CCB's Bill SB 49 was passed out of the Senate HHS committee and is on its way to the Assembly. Our amendment was accepted and the bill otherwise passed unchanged. There are a number of cannabis-related bills that have been introduced in the last week or so, including the consumption lounge bill draft. So we will continue to analyze, be engaged, and track the progress of those bills and report back to the board. So with that, Chair, members, I'm happy to answer any questions on either one of those two items.
In light of the news this morning that the legislature has suspended its rules because of the backlog of bills, and bills are still falling, do we have any that we should be monitoring kind of on our radar that will be coming forth that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean, we're tracking a number of cannabis-related bills. To get into specifics, there's portable vendor licenses. So, that envisions events in the state that allow cannabis use for a 21 and older crowd. Like I mentioned, there's the consumption lounge bill draft. And so both of those are kind of seeking to address the policy that, there's potentially not a place legally that a visitor to the state can consume cannabis, right? So there's a policy gap there, and there's a few pieces of legislation that addresses that. So I anticipate maybe a couple more cannabis-related bills that we've seen, at least the BDR numbers to come out. But right now, those are the two biggest pieces and most lengthy bills that we're looking at this point.
We have that. Don't we additionally have the bill that's proposing to continue a grace period for converting medical marijuana licenses into retail licenses also?
There's a bill and it remains to be seen how, I don't know if it's drafted the way that it was conceptually introduced or discussed at the very beginning, but yes, there is a bill that potentially seeks to address the differences between a retail license and a medical license, potentially turning those into one standard cannabis license. It also discusses mechanisms to change or reclassify a medical license as a recreational license. There's a couple components in there. I think I know what it seeks to do, but I believe that there's going to be some significant amendments around that bill before we really have an idea what it's trying to accomplish.
Board members, any questions of the director?
Chairman, I'd like to make a comment. Rihanna Jarrett for the record. With regards to the micro licensing, I think micro licensing is one approach some states have taken to incorporate or to implement social equity measures. States have taken various approaches, as the director mentioned. I do have a spreadsheet that I'll track down that I can provide when we all start looking at this issue. I would just like to ask that I think it is appropriate for the advisory commission to spend a lot of time looking at this issue. There are many layers, and we really want to see what has succeeded in other states and what hasn't. Before then, I would appreciate if we could have a board discussion on what are the goals to pass on to the advisory commission. I think one of the major things we need to do, because I've looked at this issue quite a bit, is define what our goal is. Is it diversity in the industry, or is it ameliorating the disproportionate impacts of the war on drugs, and further fleshing out which one of those is it? Is it both? And what all does that entail? At the end of the day, I think Nevada hasn't and needs to specifically say, are we trying to ameliorate the impact of the war on drugs? Because some states have done a good job of specifying how they're specifically going to do that. And we're not ameliorating it because you can't completely, but at least addressing it and making that a guiding principle. So I would just like to recommend or ask if we have some kind of discussion about that before it gets sent to the advisory commission.
So noted.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, this is Member Nylander. I agree with Member Durrett's suggestion that we do provide some guidance to the advisory committee just because of the history. I mean, and I may have I probably do have my numbers wrong, but of those initial round of licensing that occurred, 16 large companies wound up with, the vast majority of these licenses. And, I don't know that, we can sort of undo any of that, but the commission is going to need to be advised about that as being a central part of inclusion. And how do we include more people in the industry given what we have that already exists, and then to further define, diversity and how we want to do be more inclusive for certain aspects of the industry. And certainly the retail seems to be the lowest hanging fruit for that, but I don't know. There could be other ways that other states are doing it that would make sense for Nevada as well. So I do support what Commissioner Dredd is saying, and because I think if we just give the commission some sort of broad, sort of question, it's going to be very difficult for them to come back to us with a concrete recommendation that we can act upon.
Understand. With that, the issue for us at this time is whether we wait till the end of the legislative session to see what comes forth on our plate that clearly may have impact on our advisory commission to have this discussion, or start the discussion possibly in May as to this issue. So with that, at this point, we'll note it for the director. Probably we can have a little more discussion or mark it for kind of a mini discussion our next meeting, just trying to get a handle on what we think and when we think we should start having kind of a public discussion as to matters for the advisory commission.
Absolutely.
With that, that's our last item of formal business, our next meeting date is April 27th, 2021. With that, we are in adjournment we still have any additional public comment that's come in that needs to be brought on the record before we adjourn.
Chair, your intuition was correct. We have no additional public comment for today's meeting.
Okay. With that, we'll adjourn. Dennis, if you can hang on for about 5 minutes after, I'd appreciate it. A couple of things I just want to run at you.
Certainly.
Thank you. We stand in adjournment.
Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Chair.